The wagon lurched over another rut in the dusty road, and Amelia Andrews clutched her mother's frail hand tighter, trying to steady the older woman against the violent jostling that sent pain shooting through her own bruised ribs. They had been traveling for 3 days now, packed into the back of a covered wagon with 6 other women, all of them bound for the auction block in Angel's Camp, California, where desperate men paid for wives and workers with gold dust and promissory notes. It was 1869, 4 years after the war had ended, and the country was still bleeding from its wounds. Amelia's father had died at Gettysburg, and her brother had never come home from Appomattox. Her mother, Margaret, had tried to keep their small farm in Missouri running, but the debts had piled up like winter snow, and when the banker came calling, he brought the sheriff with him. They lost everything in a single afternoon. The kind neighbor who had promised to help them get to California where Margaret's sister lived had instead sold them to a traveling man who traded in human desperation. "How much farther?" Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible over the creaking wheels. At 62, she looked ancient, her face lined with worry and pain, her once proud shoulders bent beneath the weight of their circumstances. "I don't know, Mama," Amelia replied, brushing a strand of dark hair from her mother's forehead, "but we'll stay together. No matter what happens, we stay together." The woman across from them, a thin girl no older than 20, laughed bitterly. "They don't care about keeping families together, honey. They'll split you up soon as someone offers enough money." Amelia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She had turned 23 the week they lost the farm, and she had made herself a promise that day. She would not let her mother die alone in some stranger's house, working herself to death for a man who saw her as nothing more than property. The wagon finally rolled to a stop just after noon, and the driver, a hard-faced man named Clemens, yanked back the canvas flap. "Out, all of you. We're here." Angel's Camp sprawled before them like a fever dream, all rough-hewn buildings and muddy streets, bustling with miners and merchants, cowboys and con men. The California gold rush had been 20 years past, but the town still clung to the hope that another big strike would come, that fortunes could still be made in these hills. Clemens herded them toward a wooden platform in the town square, where a crowd was already gathering. Amelia helped her mother up the steps, supporting most of the older woman's weight. Margaret's breathing was labored, and Amelia knew that the journey had taken a terrible toll. A man in a dusty suit climbed onto the platform with them, his smile wide and insincere. "Gentlemen, gentlemen. Welcome to this fine afternoon's proceedings. I've brought you quality merchandise today, fresh from the East. Good workers, all of them, and some suitable for marriage besides." Amelia felt her stomach turn as he walked among them, listing their supposed qualities like they were livestock. When he reached her and Margaret, he paused, frowning. "Now, I'll be honest with you fine folks. This one here," he gestured at Amelia, "is strong and young, good for farm work or housekeeping. Pretty enough, too, if you like the dark-haired type, but she comes with a complication." He pointed at Margaret, her mother. "Old, not much use for work, but the girl won't be separated from her, so if you want this one, you take them both." A murmur ran through the crowd, and Amelia saw several men turn away, already losing interest. Her heart sank. If no one bid on them together, what would happen? Would Clemens force them apart anyway, start the bidding at $50 for the pair? The auctioneer called out. Silence. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. $40 then. "Come on, gents, that's a steal." Still nothing. Amelia felt Margaret's hand trembling in hers. 30. "I'll take 30 for both of them." A long pause, and then a voice from the back called out, $20. "That old woman probably won't last the month." The auctioneer nodded eagerly. $20, I have $20. Do I hear 25? This is inhumane. A different voice cut through the crowd, deep and rough with anger. You're selling people like cattle. You're welcome to bid if you object so strongly, mister, the auctioneer shot back. Amelia searched the crowd for the speaker and finally spotted him at the edge of the gathering. He was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with sandy brown hair that fell past his collar and a sun-weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. He wore the rough clothes of a working rancher, all worn denim and faded cotton, and his gray eyes blazed with something that might have been fury or disgust. $100, the man said, his voice carrying clearly across the square. I'll take them both home. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers, and the auctioneer's eyes went wide. 100. Sir, that's very generous, but surely you understand what you're getting. The old woman is, I understand just fine, the man interrupted, already pushing through the crowd toward the platform. $100 for both of them, and you throw in their freedom papers right now. I won't have anyone claiming later that I bought slaves. These aren't slaves, sir, they're indentured. I know what they are, and I know what you are. The man climbed onto the platform, and Amelia saw that he was even taller than she had thought, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and work-hardened hands. Now, do we have a deal, or do I make a fuss about this that brings the law down on your operation? The auctioneer's face reddened, but he nodded quickly. Deal. Clemens, get the papers. Within minutes, money had changed hands, and Amelia found herself holding a piece of paper that declared her and her mother free from any obligation. The man, whose name she learned was Garrett Blake, led them away from the platform toward a wagon that sat waiting on the far side of the square. Thank you, Amelia managed to say, though her voice shook with the weight of what had almost happened. I don't know how we'll ever repay you, but no need for repayment, Garrett said, his tone gentler than before. He helped Margaret into the wagon bed, settling her onto a pile of blankets with surprising care. I've got a ranch about 10 miles outside town. It's not much, but there's room enough and the work isn't too hard. Your mother can rest while she recovers from the journey, and you can help around the house if you're willing. But you're free to leave whenever you choose. That paper makes it legal. Amelia studied his face, searching for deception or hidden motives, but found only weariness and what might have been loneliness. Why did you do this? You don't know us. Garrett was quiet for a moment, helping Amelia up into the wagon seat beside him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. My own mother died when I was 15. Cholera. I couldn't save her, couldn't do anything but watch her waste away. And my father, he worked himself to death on that ranch in Texas, trying to make something of the land. He gathered the reins in his hands. I came out here to California 3 years ago, bought some property, built a house. But it's a lonely place, and I've spent enough time alone. When I saw you two up there, the way you were holding hands, the way you were determined to stay together no matter what, I thought maybe I could do something good for once. The admission hung in the air between them as Garrett urged the horses forward, and Amelia felt something shift in her chest, some tight knot of fear beginning to loosen. This man, this stranger, had spent a fortune he clearly didn't have much of to spare, and asked for nothing in return except perhaps a little company. The road out of Angel's Camp wound through rolling hills covered in dry grass and scattered oaks. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold and amber, and despite her exhaustion, Amelia found herself noticing the beauty of the landscape. Missouri had been green and humid, but this California country had a stark magnificence to it, all sweeping vistas and big sky. Tell me about your ranch, she said after a while, partly to break the silence and partly because she genuinely wanted to know what sort of place they were heading toward. Garrett's expression softened slightly. "It's not much yet. 200 acres, about a third of it good grazing land. I've got maybe 40 head of cattle, some horses, chickens. There's a house, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a good well. I've been working on expanding the barn and I want to build a proper bunkhouse eventually, hire some help. But for now, it's just me doing everything." "That's a lot of work for one person." "It is," he agreed, "but I like the work, keeps me busy, keeps me from thinking too much." He glanced at her sideways. "What about you? What sort of work did you do back in Missouri?" "Everything," Amelia replied, allowing herself a small smile. "We had a farm, about 80 acres. After my father and brother died, Mama and I kept it running for 2 years. I can plow, plant, harvest, tend livestock, mend fences, fix a roof if I have to. I can cook, so preserve food, manage accounts. We did it all ourselves." Garrett looked at her with open surprise. "That's impressive. Most women I've met out here can barely boil water without supervision." "Most women you've met probably weren't given much choice about learning," Amelia said, an edge creeping into her voice. "I learned because I had to, and because my mother taught me that being capable is more important than being decorative." "I didn't mean any offense," Garrett said quickly. "I genuinely think it's impressive. Hell, most men I know can't do half of what you just described." He paused. "What happened?" "To the farm, I mean." Amelia's hands clenched in her lap. "Debt. The bank wanted money we didn't have, wouldn't give us any more time. They took everything and we had nowhere to go. A neighbor said he'd help us get to California to my mother's sister in Sacramento, but he sold us instead to Clemens." "Jesus," Garrett muttered. "I'm sorry, that's a hell of a thing to go through." "We survived," Amelia said firmly, "and we're together. That's what matters." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Amelia checked on her mother several times, relieved to find the older woman sleeping peacefully in the wagon bed. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when Garrett finally pointed ahead. "There it is. Home." The ranch sat in a shallow valley, protected from the worst of the wind by the surrounding hills. The house was simple but well built, made of dark wood with a covered porch running along the front. A barn stood nearby, and Amelia could see a corral with several horses, a chicken coop, and various outbuildings. It was modest, but it was clearly the product of hard work and careful planning. "It's wonderful," she said, and meant it. Garrett pulled the wagon to a stop near the house and jumped down, then came around to help Amelia and wake Margaret gently. The older woman stirred, disoriented, and Amelia saw the moment when fear crossed her mother's face as she remembered where they were and what had happened. "It's all right, Mama," Amelia soothed. "We're safe. This is Garrett's ranch. He's offered us shelter." Margaret allowed herself to be helped down from the wagon, though she swayed on her feet. Garrett caught her elbow, steadying her with the same careful gentleness he had shown before. "Let's get you inside, Mrs. Andrews," he said. "You need rest and a proper meal." The interior of the house was as neat as the exterior, though it had the sparse, masculine feel of a place inhabited by someone who didn't much care about decoration. The main room held a table, chairs, a wood stove, and some shelves with supplies. 2 doors led off to what must be the bedrooms. Garrett guided Margaret to one of the chairs and then quickly stoked the fire in the stove. "I'll make some coffee and heat up some stew." "It's not fancy, but it's hot and filling." He glanced at Amelia. "The bedroom on the right is mine. The one on the left has a bed and some basic furniture. You two should take it. I can sleep out here on the floor for now." "We can't take your bedroom," Amelia protested. "You're not." "I'm giving it to you. There's a difference." Garrett busied himself with the coffee pot, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude. Tomorrow I'll see about setting up something more permanent, but for tonight, just rest." Amelia wanted to argue further, but she could see the exhaustion in her mother's face and feel it in her own bones. "Thank you," she said instead, and this time Garrett just nodded. The stew was simple: beans and salted pork with some vegetables, but it was the first hot meal they had eaten in days, and Amelia savored every bite. Margaret managed half a bowl before her eyes began to close, and Amelia guided her mother to the bedroom, helping her out of her dusty clothes and into the bed. "Are we really safe?" Margaret whispered as Amelia pulled the blankets up around her. "I think so, Mama. He seems like a good man." "They all seem that way at first," Margaret said, her voice heavy with the cynicism of experience. "Be careful, Amelia. Keep your guard up." "I will. Now sleep. You need to rest." Amelia returned to the main room to find Garrett had cleared away the dishes and was standing by the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. She studied him for a moment, this tall stranger who had upended his life to save two women he didn't know. "Why did you really do it?" she asked quietly. Garrett turned, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I told you. I saw you two up there and I couldn't walk away. But $100, that's a fortune." "It's money," he corrected. "And money is only worth what you use it for. I've been saving for a while, planning to expand the herd, but cattle can wait. You couldn't." Amelia moved closer, drawn by the honesty in his voice. "You could have just bought me, left my mother behind. It would have been cheaper." "I could have," Garrett agreed. "But then you would have spent every day worrying about her, wondering where she was if she was suffering. And I would have spent every day knowing I separated a family for the sake of saving some money. Neither of us would have been happy." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I'm not some hero. I'm just a man who had a chance to do the right thing and took it. Don't make it more complicated than that." But it was more complicated, Amelia thought. Everything about this situation was complicated. She was standing in a stranger's house, dependent on his charity, with no clear future and a mother who needed constant care. And yet, for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear and desperation. She felt hope. "I want to help," she said firmly. "With the ranch, the house, whatever needs doing. We're not helpless and we're not looking for a free ride. Let us work for our keep." Garrett studied her face for a long moment. "All right, if that's what you want, but your mother rests until she's stronger. I won't have her working herself to death." "Agreed." Amelia held out her hand. "Partners then, until we figure out what comes next." Garrett's hand engulfed hers, warm and calloused. "Partners." That night, Amelia lay beside her sleeping mother and stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the California countryside. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind whispered through the eaves. And from the main room came the soft sounds of Garrett settling onto the floor for the night, having insisted on giving them privacy and comfort. She thought about the auction platform, about how close they had come to being separated or bought by someone cruel. She thought about Garrett's gray eyes and the way he had spoken about his own lost family. And she thought about the future, which suddenly seemed less bleak than it had in a very long time. Morning came early on the ranch. Amelia woke to the sounds of Garrett moving around in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting through the door. She dressed quickly in the same clothes she had worn the day before, her only clothes, and emerged to find him frying eggs on the stove. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," Amelia admitted. "The bed is very comfortable." "Good. I wasn't sure about the mattress. I bought it used from a family moving back east, thought it might be lumpy." He dished eggs onto 2 plates. "Your mother still sleeping?" "Yes." "The journey really took it out of her. Let her sleep as long as she needs." Garrett set the plates on the table. Sit, eat. Then I'll show you around the ranch properly and you can decide what you'd like to help with." They ate in companionable silence, and Amelia found herself sneaking glances at Garrett when he wasn't looking. In the morning light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the work-worn quality of his hands, the way his hair curled slightly at the ends. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way, but more than that, he seemed solid and dependable, like one of the old oak trees that dotted the hills. After breakfast, Garrett led her outside, and Amelia got her first real look at the ranch in daylight. It was even more impressive than she had realized. The land rolled away in all directions, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance, their dark shapes moving against the golden grass. "I usually start the day checking the animals," Garrett explained as they walked toward the barn. "Make sure everyone is healthy, has enough water and feed. Then I move on to whatever project I'm working on. Right now, I'm trying to finish the new barn extension before winter." Inside the barn, Amelia met the horses, 3 sturdy working animals and 1 pretty mare that Garrett said he was training for riding. There were also 2 milk cows, and Garrett demonstrated the morning milking routine with practiced efficiency. "I can do this," Amelia said, watching carefully. "I milked our cows back home every morning. All right, tomorrow it's yours." Garrett straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Come on, I'll show you the rest." They spent the morning touring the property, and Garrett explained his plans for expansion, his hopes for the ranch's future. He wanted to increase the cattle herd, improve the breeding stock, maybe plant some fruit trees near the house. He spoke with passion and knowledge, and Amelia found herself drawn into his vision, offering suggestions based on her own farming experience. "You could divert some water from that creek," she said, pointing to a stream that ran through the property. "Set up an irrigation system for a vegetable garden. Fresh produce would save you money and improve your diet." Garrett looked where she was pointing, then back at her with something like admiration in his eyes. "That's a damn good idea. I've been buying most of my vegetables in town, and they're expensive and half-rotten by the time I get them home. Give me a shovel and some time and I'll have a garden planted by the end of the month," Amelia said confidently. "You sure? That's a lot of work." "I'm sure. I want to contribute and I'm good at this." They returned to the house around noon to find Margaret awake and sitting at the table, looking stronger than she had the night before. Garrett immediately set about making lunch while Amelia sat with her mother, filling her in on the morning's tour. "He seems like a good man," Margaret said quietly, watching Garrett work. "But be careful, Amelia, we don't really know him." "I know, Mama, but we have to trust someone and he did save us." Over the next few weeks, a routine established itself. Amelia threw herself into the work of the ranch with a determination that surprised even her. She took over the morning milking, tended the chickens, and began work on the vegetable garden, spending hours in the hot sun digging irrigation channels and preparing beds. Garrett worked alongside her when he could, and they fell into an easy partnership, each respecting the other's knowledge and experience. Margaret improved slowly, regaining some of her strength under the influence of regular meals and rest. She took over the cooking and mending, insisting that she needed to be useful, and her presence brought a warmth to the house that it had previously lacked. The 3 of them ate dinner together every evening, and gradually they began to share their stories, their histories, their hopes. Amelia learned that Garrett had served in the Union Army during the war, fighting in some of the bloodiest battles. He didn't talk about it much, but sometimes at night she would hear him moving restlessly in the main room, and she suspected he was haunted by memories he couldn't shake. Garrett learned about Amelia's father, a gentle man who had believed in the Union cause and died for it. and about her brother, who had been only 17 when he marched away and never came home. He learned about the farm they had loved and lost, and the betrayal that had led them to the auction block. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift between Amelia and Garrett. It started with small things. Hands brushing as they passed tools back and forth, lingering glances across the dinner table, the way Garrett would always make sure Amelia had the shady side when they worked together under the hot sun. One evening, about a month after their arrival, Amelia was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Garrett joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Beautiful evening," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "It is," Amelia agreed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I never get tired of watching the sun set over these hills. Neither do I." Garrett was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For everything you've been doing. The garden, the animals, all of it. You've been working as hard as any ranch hand I could have hired, and you never complain." "I like the work," Amelia said honestly. "It feels good to be useful again, to be building something instead of just trying to survive. Still, you didn't have to. You and your mother could have just rested, figured out your next move. But instead, you've thrown yourself into this place like it's your own." Amelia turned to look at him, noticing the way the evening light caught in his gray eyes. "Maybe that's because it's starting to feel like home." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning, and Garrett's expression softened. "I'm glad," he said quietly, "because I've been thinking and I don't want you to leave." Amelia's heart began to beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that this place has never felt like a real home until you and Margaret arrived. I'm saying that I look forward to every morning because I know I'll see you at breakfast. I'm saying that when I think about the future now, I can't imagine it without you in it." Garrett set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. "Amelia, I know we haven't known each other long, and I know the circumstances of our meeting were far from ideal, but somewhere along the way, I started falling in love with you." Amelia felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of hearing him voice what she had been feeling for weeks. "Garrett, you don't have to say anything right now," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for an answer. I just wanted you to know how I felt. And I want you to know that regardless of how you feel about me, you and your mother always have a home here. That paper I got in Angel's Camp is legal. You're free, but I hope you'll choose to stay." Amelia reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You're not the only one who's been falling in love," she said softly. "I've been trying to tell myself it was gratitude or that I was just confused because you saved us. But it's not that. It's you. The way you care for the animals, the way you make my mother laugh, the way you look at the land like it's something precious. The way you treat me like an equal, not like property or a burden. I love you, Garrett Blake, and I don't want to leave." Garrett's face broke into a smile that transformed him, erasing years of loneliness from his features. He stood, pulling Amelia to her feet, and then his hands were framing her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," Amelia whispered. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking the spell. But then Garrett's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Amelia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, became something more urgent, more certain, a promise of everything they could be together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you owe me anything, not because you need a home, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Yes," Amelia said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." From inside the house came a whoop of joy, and they both turned to see Margaret standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face and a huge smile on her lips. "I was wondering when you two would finally figure it out," she said, laughing. "I've been watching you dance around each other for weeks." Garrett laughed too, a sound of pure happiness, and pulled both women into a hug. "I hope you know you're part of this deal too, Margaret. Your family now." "I'd be honored," Margaret said, wiping her eyes. "And I can't think of a better man for my daughter." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Angel's Camp, with Margaret as witness and the local preacher officiating. Amelia wore a dress that Margaret had sewn for her, simple but beautiful, made from fabric that Garrett had bought in town. He wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, and when he saw Amelia walking toward him, his eyes shone with unshed tears. The vows were traditional, but when Garrett slipped the simple gold band onto Amelia's finger, he added his own words. "I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. You saved me from loneliness, Amelia, and I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of you." Amelia's voice shook as she replied, "I promise to love you, trust you, and build a life with you. You gave me and my mother hope when we had none, and I'll never forget that. I'll never take for granted the gift of being your wife." After the ceremony, they celebrated with a simple meal at the town's only restaurant, and then they rode back to the ranch, now officially husband and wife. Margaret discreetly retired to her room early that evening, leaving Garrett and Amelia alone for their first night as a married couple. Garrett had moved his belongings to the other bedroom, the one Amelia and Margaret had been sharing, and he had cleaned and prepared the larger room for them to share. Candles flickered on the nightstand, casting a warm glow over the space. "Are you nervous?" Garrett asked softly, standing near the window, giving Amelia space. "A little," she admitted. "Not because I don't want this, but because everything has changed so fast." "We can take this as slow as you need," Garrett said, moving closer. "I meant what I said in those vows. I want to be worthy of you, and that means respecting you always." Amelia reached for him, pulling him close. "I know, and I trust you completely." That night, they came together with tenderness and passion, two lonely people finding solace and joy in each other. Garrett was gentle and patient, and Amelia discovered that physical love could be something beautiful rather than something to be endured. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the candlelight, and Amelia felt a contentment she had never known before. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too," Garrett replied, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible," Amelia countered. "Thank you for not walking away." The weeks turned into months, and life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Amelia's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables throughout the growing season. The cattle herd grew, and Garrett hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who treated Amelia with respect and Margaret with courtesy. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Margaret's health continued to improve, and she threw herself into creating a real home for them all. She made curtains for the windows, planted flowers near the house, and spent hours in the kitchen creating meals that filled the house with warmth and good smells. She and Garrett developed an easy relationship, and he began calling her mother, which made the older woman's eyes tear up every time. But it was Amelia and Garrett's relationship that truly blossomed. They worked side by side during the day and spent the evenings talking, laughing, planning their future. They made love with increasing confidence and passion, learning each other's bodies and desires. They argued sometimes, usually about ranch business, but they always talked through their disagreements with respect and honesty. In the spring of 1870, nearly a year after they had arrived at the ranch, Amelia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she wanted to be certain before she told Garrett. When her suspicions were confirmed by the doctor in Angel's camp, she rode home with her heart full of joy and trepidation. She found Garrett in the barn, mending a section of fence, and when he saw her face, he immediately set down his tools. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Nothing's wrong," Amelia said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "In fact, everything is very right. Garrett, we're going to have a baby." For a moment, Garrett just stared at her as if he couldn't process the words. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he picked her up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We're having a baby," he repeated, setting her down carefully. "Amelia, that's wonderful. That's incredible. Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be riding?" "I'm fine," she assured him, laughing at his sudden concern. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and they managed without being wrapped in cotton." But Garrett was not to be dissuaded from his newfound protectiveness. He insisted she reduce her workload, take more breaks, eat more. He fussed over her constantly, and though Amelia sometimes found it annoying, she was also touched by his care. Margaret was overjoyed at the news, immediately beginning work on baby clothes and blankets. She shared her own experiences of pregnancy and childbirth with Amelia, offering advice and reassurance. The months of Amelia's pregnancy were some of the happiest of her life. Her body changed, growing round with new life, and Garrett treated her like she was made of spun glass. At night, he would place his hand on her belly and talk to the baby, telling stories about the ranch and making promises about the future they would share. In January of 1871, on a cold, clear night, Amelia went into labor. Margaret and Garrett were both there, and they sent one of the ranch hands racing into town for the doctor. But babies come on their own schedule, and by the time the doctor arrived, Amelia had already delivered a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire ranch. Garrett held his son for the first time with shaking hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Amelia, he's absolutely perfect." They named him Gabriel after Amelia's father who had died at Gettysburg. Garrett Blake became the center of their world, a tiny person who demanded constant attention and gave unconditional love in return. Garrett proved to be a devoted father, often waking in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. Margaret was an equally doting grandmother, and the house was filled with laughter and the sounds of a growing family. The ranch continued to prosper, and Garrett built an addition onto the house, expanding it to accommodate their growing family and give Margaret her own space. When Gabriel was 2 years old, Amelia became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Garrett's mother. Grace had her father's gray eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was a calm, observant baby who seemed to take in everything around her with solemn interest. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters when the cold seemed endless, and dry summers when the grass turned brown and the cattle suffered. There were illnesses and injuries, conflicts with neighboring ranchers, and the constant worry that came with trying to make a living from the land. But through it all, Amelia and Garrett faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. One evening, when Gabriel was 5 and Grace was 3, Amelia and Garrett sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Margaret, now 68 but still spry and engaged with life, was showing Gabriel how to identify different birds by their calls. "You ever think about that day in Angel's camp?" Garrett asked quietly, his hand finding Amelia's. Sometimes, Amelia admitted. Usually when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, I think about how different things could have been, how close we came to being separated or worse. I think about it too, Garrett said. And every time I do, I thank God that I happened to be in town that day, that I heard what was happening and couldn't walk away. Amelia turned to look at her husband, this man who had saved her and her mother, who had given them a home and a family and a future. The years had added some gray to his hair and more lines to his face, but his eyes were still the same, still full of love and integrity. I used to wonder why you did it, she said. Why you spent all that money on two strangers, but I understand now. You were lonely, and you saw a chance to do something good to maybe fill that empty space in your life, and in saving us, you saved yourself too. Garrett nodded slowly. You're right. This ranch was just a place before you came. Now it's a home. You and Margaret and the children, you're what makes it mean something. We're blessed, Amelia said simply. Despite everything we went through, everything we lost, we found something better. We found each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the hills, their children's laughter a counterpoint to the evening sounds of the ranch. And Amelia thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the auction block in Angel's Camp to this porch, this moment, this life. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows. Margaret lived to see Gabriel start school and Grace learn to ride a horse. She lived to see the ranch expand to 500 acres and the herd grow to over 100 head. But in the spring of 1878, at the age of 71, Margaret fell ill with pneumonia and passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the family she loved. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, under an old oak tree, and Garrett carved a beautiful headstone that read, Margaret Andrews, beloved mother and grandmother who never gave up hope. Amelia grieved deeply for her mother, but she was comforted by the knowledge that Margaret had spent her final years happy and loved, part of a family that valued her. And she was grateful that they had been together through it all, that the promise she had made on that wagon so many years ago had been kept. Gabriel grew into a strong, thoughtful young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Grace became a spirited girl with a talent for working with horses. And in 1879, Amelia gave birth to twin boys, James and John, who brought new chaos and joy into their lives through it all. Amelia and Garrett's love remained constant, a foundation that supported everything else. They still worked side by side, still made decisions together, still found time for quiet moments on the porch where they could simply be together. One evening, when Amelia was 45 and Garrett was 52, they sat watching another sunset, much like the ones they had watched for over 20 years now. The children were all inside, Gabriel helping the twins with their reading while Grace practiced her piano, a recent addition to the house that Garrett had surprised them all with. We've built a good life, Garrett said, his arm around Amelia's shoulders. We have, she agreed, leaning into him. Better than I ever imagined possible on that terrible day in Angel's Camp. Do you remember what I said to you that first night? Garrett asked. About being partners? I do, and we have been every day since. Best decision I ever made, Garrett said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Saying I'll take them both home. Best $100 I ever spent, Amelia laughed. I'd like to think we've given you a good return on your investment. Return? Amelia, you've given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to get up every morning. You've given me love and partnership and more happiness than any man deserves. I'd spend that $100 1,000 times over for the life we've built together. Amelia turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had saved her and then loved her, who had been her partner and her best friend for more than half her life now. His hair was fully gray now, and his face was deeply lined, but his eyes were still the same gray that had looked at her with compassion and determination on that auction platform so long ago. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she had spoken them. "I will always love you, and I love you," Garrett replied, kissing her softly. "From that first moment I saw you on that platform, holding your mother's hand and refusing to give up, I knew you were special. I knew you were worth fighting for, and I've never regretted it, not for a single moment." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Amelia thought about the long road that had brought her here. The loss and pain, the fear and uncertainty, but also the hope and love and determination. She thought about her father and brother who had died too young, about her mother who had lived just long enough to see her daughter happy. And she thought about the future, about Gabriel who would inherit the ranch and carry on the legacy they had built, about Grace who would forge her own path with the same determination her mother had shown, about the twins who were still young and full of possibility. She thought about the grandchildren she hoped to have, the generations that would come after them, all of them rooted in this place that had become home. The house behind them was filled with light and laughter, with the sounds of family and life and love. The ranch spread out around them, a testament to hard work and partnership. And beside her sat the man who had seen her worth when others had seen only a burden, who had chosen compassion over convenience, who had built a life with her that exceeded anything she could have imagined. "Come on," Garrett said, standing and pulling Amelia to her feet. "Let's go inside. The children will want their goodnight story, and I believe it's your turn." Amelia took his hand, lacing her fingers through his, and they walked together into the warm house, into the life they had created, into the future they would face together. And as the door closed behind them, the last light of day faded from the sky, and the ranch settled into the peaceful quiet of evening, everything exactly as it should be. Their story, which had begun with an auction and a lonely rancher's impulse toward kindness, had become something beautiful and enduring. They had taken the broken pieces of their separate lives and forged them into something whole, something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. And if you had asked Amelia, on that long-ago day when she stood on the auction platform with her mother's hand in hers, if she believed in happy endings, she would have said no. But she would have been wrong. Because sometimes, when you least expect it, when you've given up hope, a stranger steps forward and says, "I'll take them both home," and everything changes. Years later, when Gabriel brought his own wife to the ranch, a kind young woman named Sarah, Amelia told them the story of how she and Garrett had met. She told them about the auction, about the moment when Garrett had bid on them both, about the journey to the ranch and the slow building of trust and then love. "I want you to understand," she told Gabriel and Sarah, "that love doesn't always come easily or simply. Sometimes it comes from the darkest places, from moments of desperation and fear. But that doesn't make it any less real or precious. Your father and I built our love on a foundation of respect and partnership, and that's what sustained us through everything." Gabriel looked at his father, who nodded in confirmation. "Your mother is the strongest person I've ever known," Garrett said. "She took the worst situation imaginable and refused to be defeated by it. She took my lonely bachelor existence and turned it into a real home. Everything good in my life came from the decision I made that day in Angel's Camp." "I want what you two have," Sarah said softly. "That kind of partnership, that kind of love." Amelia smiled, taking Garrett's hand. Then work for it every day. Choose each other even when it's hard. Be honest with each other, even when the truth is difficult. And never forget that you're on the same team, facing the world together. It was advice born of experience, of 25 years of marriage and all the challenges and triumphs that had come with it. And as Amelia watched her son and his new wife absorb her words, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had broken the cycle of loss and hardship that had threatened to destroy them. They had created something lasting, something good, something that would continue into the next generation and beyond. The ranch continued to thrive under Gabriel's management when Garrett began to slow down, his body finally showing the effects of decades of hard physical labor. But he never stopped working entirely, always finding some small task to occupy his days, always present to offer advice or simply to sit on the porch and watch the world go by. Amelia, too, found her pace slowing as the years advanced, but she remained active and engaged, tending her garden, helping with the grandchildren who began to arrive with delightful regularity, and maintaining the household with the same efficiency she had always shown. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Garrett surprised Amelia by taking her back to Angel's camp. They rode into town in a proper carriage now, not the simple wagon they had left in all those years ago, and they were prosperous, respected members of the community. Garrett led Amelia to the town square, to the spot where the auction platform had once stood. It was gone now, torn down years earlier, and in its place was a small park with benches and trees. "I wanted to come back here," Garrett said, his arm around Amelia's waist, "to the place where our life together really began. I wanted to stand here with you and remember what we overcame, what we built from that terrible day." Amelia leaned against him, memories washing over her. She could almost see the platform, almost feel the fear and desperation that had gripped her as she stood there with her mother. But those feelings were distant now, tempered by the years of happiness that had followed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being the man who stepped forward when everyone else turned away, for seeing beyond what we were in that moment to what we could become." "Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher," Garrett replied, "for building a life with me, for loving me despite everything. You're my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life, Amelia Blake, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." They stayed in Angel's camp overnight, sleeping in the finest hotel, eating at the best restaurant, celebrating all the years they had shared and all the years still to come. And when they returned to the ranch the next day, it was with renewed appreciation for the journey they had traveled together. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, years blending into each other in the way they do when a life is full and meaningful. Grace married a local teacher and settled in Angel's camp, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to build her own life. The twins, James and John, both showed an interest in ranching and stayed on to help Gabriel, bringing their own energy and ideas to the operation. And through it all, Amelia and Garrett remained the constant center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, weathered financial difficulties, and celebrated successes. They grew old together, their bodies aging but their partnership as strong as ever. On a warm spring evening in 1895, Garrett and Amelia sat on the porch they had sat on thousands of times before. Garrett was 78 now, Amelia 71, and they had been married for 33 years. The ranch sprawled around them, home now to 3 generations of their family, a thriving enterprise that employed dozens of people and had become one of the most successful in the region. "I've been thinking," Garrett said, his voice still strong despite his age, "about that day in Angel's camp. About the auction. You think about it often, Amelia observed, not unkindly. "I do, because it was the most important day of my life, the day everything changed." He turned to look at her, and his eyes, though faded with age, still held the same warmth and love they always had. "I was so lonely before you came, Amelia. I had land and cattle and all the makings of success, but I was dying inside. And then I saw you, standing on that platform with your mother, refusing to be separated no matter what, and something in me recognized something in you. I knew you were going to change my life. And you changed mine," Amelia said, taking his weathered hand in hers. "You saved me, Garrett. You and Mama would have been separated or worse. But more than that, you showed me what love could be, what partnership meant. You gave me a family and a home and a future I never could have imagined." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for more than 3 decades. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their voices carrying on the evening air. The house behind them was full of life and light, testament to everything they had built together. "If I could go back," Garrett said finally, "and do it all over again, knowing everything that was going to happen, all the hard times and the good times, the struggles and the triumphs, I wouldn't change a single thing. Not one moment. Because it all led here to this, to us." Amelia felt tears on her cheeks, tears of gratitude and love and the bittersweet awareness of mortality. They were both old now, and they couldn't ignore that their time was growing shorter. But they had used the time they had well. They had loved fiercely and built something lasting. "I love you," she said, the words she had spoken countless times over the years, words that never lost their meaning or power. "I will love you until the day I die, and if there's anything beyond that, I'll love you there too." "And I love you," Garrett replied, pulling her close. "Always and forever, Amelia Blake. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." As darkness fell over the ranch, they remained on the porch, two old people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that had lasted a lifetime. Inside the house, their family continued with the business of living, carrying on the legacy that Garrett and Amelia had created together. Garrett lived to be 82, passing away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1899, with Amelia beside him as she had been for 37 years. They buried him next to Margaret on the hill under the oak tree, and the entire community turned out for the funeral, a testament to the respect and affection he had earned over his life. Amelia lived another 5 years, remaining active and engaged despite her grief. She spent her final years surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the matriarch of a family that had grown beyond anything she could have imagined on that terrible day in Angel's Camp, so long ago. When she passed in 1904 at the age of 79, they buried her beside Garrett, and on her headstone, Gabriel carved words he knew his mother would have approved of. "Amelia Blake, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother who never lost hope." The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, a thriving enterprise that employed dozens and supported the community. And always, the story of Garrett and Amelia was told to the new generations, a reminder of where they had come from and what love and partnership could accomplish. The story of the auction, of the lonely rancher who had stepped forward and said, "I'll take them both home," became part of family legend. It was told at weddings and christenings, shared during long winter evenings, passed down as a testament to compassion and courage and love. Because in the end, that's what Garrett and Amelia's story was really about. It was about seeing worth where others saw only burden. It was about choosing kindness over convenience. It was about two people finding each other in the darkness and building something beautiful together. It was about hope and love and the transformative power of saying yes when everyone else says no. It was about family and home and the land that sustained them all. And it was about the enduring truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that true love, real partnership, is worth more than all the gold in California. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and the passage of time. But what they created lived on, in the ranch they built, in the family they raised, in the community they helped shape. And in the memory of a spring day in 1869, when a young woman stood on an auction platform holding her mother's hand, and a lonely rancher made the decision that would change all their lives forever.